Think about someone you were close to, a friend, a family member, maybe a partner, someone who knew your routines, your humor, the version of you that you didn't show many people. And then one day, nothing. No argument that explained it, no conversation where things fell apart. They just stopped. Messages left unread, calls that rang out, a silence where a person used to be. If you've been on the receiving end of that, you know the specific kind of confusion it creates, because there was no ending, just an absence. And if you're honest, maybe you're watching this from the other side. Maybe you're the one who went quiet. Maybe you already know what it feels like to just disappear from someone's life and not fully understand why you did it either. Most people assume that cutting everyone off is an act of coldness, a choice made by someone who simply doesn't care enough to stay. But what if that's not what's happening at all? What if, for most people who do this, it's not coldness, it's fear. Not indifference, but exhaustion so deep it started to feel like survival. That question is what this video is going to follow, and the answer is going to feel different depending on which side of the silence you're standing on. If someone cut you off without explanation, the first thing you probably did was go back through everything. You replayed the last conversation, looking for the moment you missed. You audited yourself, what you said, what you didn't say, whether you were too much or not enough. You looked for the thing you could have done differently, because having a reason felt better than having nothing. And underneath all of that was a grief that's hard to explain to people who haven't felt it, because the person didn't die. They're still out there living their life, but they're gone from yours completely, without warning, without giving you the chance to respond or repair anything. That kind of loss carries a specific shame to it. The feeling of being rejected so thoroughly that the other person didn't even think you were worth an explanation. It's a reasonable response. It makes complete sense that you'd feel that way. But here's the question worth sitting with, and it won't feel like it helps yet, but stay with it. Was any of this actually about you? To answer that honestly, you have to go back further than the moment they disappeared. You have to go back to everything that happened before, the part that was invisible to almost everyone around them. By the time someone cuts everyone off, they have usually already tried to stay. That's the part that doesn't get told, because from the outside, the cutoff looks sudden, a decision, a door closing. But from the inside, it was the last step in a process that had been building quietly for months, sometimes years. Picture someone who was always the one who showed up, who remembered the details, who made the effort, who held space for everyone else's problems while carrying their own in silence, who asked how people were doing because it mattered to them and rarely got asked in return. At some point, they tried to say something. Once, carefully. Maybe they mentioned that they were overwhelmed or that they needed something different, and it was met with defensiveness or minimizing or nothing at all. So they didn't try again. Not because they stopped needing, but because they'd learned slowly and quietly that expressing what they needed didn't lead anywhere. That learning is important because it means that by the time they went silent, they weren't making a dramatic gesture. They were doing the only thing that had ever worked withdrawing, but this time, completely. The cutoff wasn't the beginning of something. It was the exhausted end of a very long attempt to stay. Which raises the question that almost nobody asks. If they were struggling that much, why didn't they just say something? The easy answer is that they were conflict avoidant. And sometimes that's true. But the more honest answer is usually this. They had already learned, somewhere along the way, that speaking up didn't work. Maybe not in this specific relationship, but somewhere before it. There are people who grew up in environments where having needs was treated as a problem, where expressing emotion made things worse, not better, where the way to be loved, or at least accepted, was to want as little as possible and handle everything quietly. Those early lessons don't disappear when you become an adult. They follow you into every friendship, every relationship, every moment where something difficult needs to be said. So when the moment came when they finally reached the edge of what they could carry, the choice didn't feel like speaking versus leaving. It felt like staying in something painful versus removing themselves from it. And one of those options, at least, gave them back some sense of control. There's also shame woven into this. Many people who cut others off carry a private feeling they can't articulate, that they failed the relationship somehow, that they were too sensitive, or not enough, or simply wrong to have needed what they needed. And when shame is that heavy, silence feels safer than any conversation that might confirm it out loud. But what actually happened on the other side of that silence, that's where it gets complicated. The first thing most people who cut everyone off feel is relief. Not the relief of not caring, something more physical than that. The specific quiet of a nervous system that had been running on high alert for so long that it forgot what rest felt like, and suddenly there was nothing to manage. No messages to respond to. No moods to absorb. No version of yourself to perform for anyone. That relief is real, and it makes sense. When something has been draining you for long enough, removing it genuinely does feel like breathing again. But the relief doesn't stay clean. What follows it, usually within weeks, sometimes sooner, is more complicated. The face of someone they actually loved, surfacing in a quiet moment. The guilt of knowing that somewhere, that person is confused and hurting and has no idea why. The loneliness that settles in once the noise fades and there's nothing left but space. And underneath all of it, a paradox that is hard to sit with. The very thing they cut off in search of peace was connection. And what they wanted more than almost anything was real connection. Not the draining kind, not the one-sided kind, but the kind that felt safe enough to actually be themselves in. They didn't leave because they stopped caring. In many cases, they left because they cared too much, for too long, without enough coming back. That paradox matters, because it's the key to understanding what this behavior actually is. Here is the question that this video has been building toward, and it's one worth sitting with, honestly, whichever side you're on. Is cutting everyone off an act of genuine self-protection? Or is it avoidance that has learned to call itself a boundary? The honest answer is that sometimes it's both. And in the moment, even the person doing it usually can't tell the difference. But there is a difference. And it matters. Genuine self-protection tends to be specific. It happens after something real, a pattern of harm, a relationship that was genuinely damaging, a situation where staying came at a serious cost. It often follows attempts at repair that didn't work. And it's proportionate, not a total erasure of everyone, but a considered distance from something specific. Avoidance looks different. It's total. It follows a pattern, the same exit, triggered by the same emotional pressure in relationship after relationship. It brings relief, but never resolution. And it tends to expand over time until the category of people who are safe enough to stay close to becomes smaller and smaller and smaller. This isn't a verdict. It's a question, a genuine one. If you recognize yourself in this, if you're the person who disappears, the question isn't whether what you did was wrong. The question is, which one was it? Because that answer changes what comes next. And there is something that comes next for both people that almost never gets talked about. For the person who was cut off, the effect doesn't end when they accept that the relationship is over. It tends to travel forward into the next friendship, where they watch more carefully for signs of withdrawal, into the next relationship, where closeness starts to feel like something that could be revoked without warning. The hypervigilance becomes quiet and habitual, a background scan running in every new connection, looking for the moment things start to go wrong. An unresolved exit doesn't just end a relationship. It changes how someone experiences the next one. For the person who did the cutting, the pattern, if left unexamined, tends to repeat, not because they're broken, but because it worked. The pressure built, the exit happened, the relief came. And the nervous system files that away. Over time, the threshold lowers. The tolerance for emotional discomfort shrinks. The circle of people they can stay close to gets smaller, often without them fully noticing. The pain that made the cutoff feel necessary doesn't get resolved by the cutoff. It gets deferred, carried forward, intact, into the next situation that asks too much. That's not a warning. It's just the honest shape of what happens when something stays unexamined. The people who cut everyone off are not cold. They are not broken. And they are not, in most cases, people who stopped caring. They're people who never fully learned or never had the chance to practice one specific thing: how to stay in connection while also protecting themselves. How to say this is hurting me before it becomes I'm done. How to ask for what they need before the need turns into silence. That's not a character flaw. It's a gap, often one that was created long before the relationship that ended it. And for the people who were left behind, the ones still sitting with the confusion and the unanswered questions, understanding this doesn't mean what happened to you was acceptable. It means it probably wasn't about you in the way you thought. Both of those things can be true at the same time. The real question for everyone this video touched, on whichever side, is a quiet one. What would it take to learn that thing now? Not to fix the past, not to reach back out, or to forgive what isn't ready to be forgiven. Just what would it take to learn before it happens again? That question doesn't need an answer tonight, but it's worth keeping.